Welcome to the Phil and A Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
Hey, everyone.
So today we are doing a complete deep dive into a very specific, honestly fascinating source document.
Yeah, it's the Koh Mak Travel Guide, specifically the 2026 Honest Verdict.
Right. And our mission today is to essentially be the ultimate learner for you, the listener. We want to find out the absolute, unvarnished truth about traveling to Southeast Asia right now. No glossy tourism board spin, just the hard, logistical facts.
Which is so necessary because the spin out there is intense.
It really is. But before we get into all those facts and prices from the guide, you know those time-lapse videos of a petri dish?
Oh, yeah, like from biology class.
Exactly. The ones where scientists introduce just a single microscopic drop of some reactive agent into a perfectly stable blank environment.
Right, and at first, absolutely nothing happens.
Nothing happens. But then, right at the point of contact, this rapid biological expansion just kicks off. The bacteria explodes outward.
Yeah, it just consumes every available nutrient.
It multiplies, it builds over itself, lighting up the dish until there is absolutely no blank space left. The original environment is just, completely unrecognizable.
It's a really fascinating visual for exponential growth. And honestly, from a systemic perspective, it's also quite terrifying.
Very terrifying.
Because you are watching a complete rewriting of an ecosystem in a matter of hours. The original structure gets entirely overwhelmed.
Exactly. Now, for everyone listening, I want you to hold that image of the pristine petri dish in your mind, but swap out the agar gel for a beautiful, untouched tropical beach in Southeast Asia.
Okay, I can picture that. Maybe a fringe of palm trees, some local fishing boats.
Incredibly clear water.
Right.
And that single drop the scientist introduces.
Yeah.
That is mass tourism.
Oh, yeah. Wow. The developers, the heavy machinery, the international hotel chains.
Concrete mixing trucks just rolling right off the ferries.
It is, in every sense, an economic biological response. Capital just rushes into the blank space.
And usually, that is completely terminal for the original vibe of the place. I mean, you lose the fishing boats, and you get 50 jet skis doing donuts in the bay.
You lose the quiet beach, and you get an all-night neon bucket party circuit.
Which is why today's deep dive is so incredibly fascinating. Our focal point, Koh Mak, is tucked way over in the Gulf of Thailand, practically brushing up against the Cambodian border.
Yeah, it is a tiny, car-free island. But the reason we are analyzing this specific destination today isn't just because of where it is on a map.
No, it's because of what this island actively didn't do. The central premise here is just staggering when you look at the region's history.
It really is. I mean, legendary Thai destinations, places like Koh Phi, Koh Samui, Phuket.
They all succumb to that massive unrestrained development cycle.
The concrete, the crowds, the corporatization. But Koh Mak looked at that exact same trajectory, with developers literally knocking on their doors with briefcases full of cash, and they just said no.
They actively turned away the big foreign developers. They legally banned jet skis. They flat out refused the speedboat party circuit.
They essentially built a firewall against the typical Southeast Asian tourism model. A firewall constructed out of pure community consensus.
And what we need to unpack for you today is whether that firewall actually holds up in 2026. Is this an authentic preservation of culture? Or is it, just a different flavor of exclusivity?
We really need to stress test this place.
Exactly. We're breaking down every hard fact, every hidden logistics trap, and the real out-of-pocket costs to see if the so-called eco-paradise is genuinely worth your time and money, or if it's just really clever greenwashing.
Let's start with the baseline physical and demographic reality, because the scale of this island is shockingly small.
It is tiny.
And that scale dictates everything else we are going to talk about today. Koh Mak is only 16 square kilometers of land.
16. I mean, you could accidentally walk across that if you got lost looking for breakfast.
You practically could, yeah. And there are fewer than 400 resident families living there permanently.
Oh.
Across the entire island, there's a total of roughly 78 properties you can actually stay at.
That is wild.
And that scarcity isn't an accident of history. It is a meticulously engineered outcome. The community association operates under a framework that enforces a really strict rule. Only local families can own accommodation businesses.
This is the part that I just find so hard to believe in the modern era of globalized real estate. The explicit bans on this island read like a massive developer's nightmare.
Absolutely.
There are absolutely no international hotel chains. You aren't going to find a Marriott or a Hilton.
No, but Koh Mak has drawn a hard, visible line in the sand. And functionally, it's working for them. They recently achieved a Green Destinations Low Carbon certification, and they were featured by the BBC Travel Desk.
Right, as this tiny island fundamentally redefining how we travel to Thailand. But wait, this is where the logic normally breaks down for me.
How so?
Usually when a place gets that kind of international prestige, the BBC features, the exclusive eco-labels, and that extreme artificial scarcity of having only 78 properties.
The prices immediately go stratospheric.
Exactly. It becomes an enclave for the ultra-rich. The billionaires push out the millionaires. But the current pricing data in the 2026 guide tells a completely paradoxical story.
Yeah, the economics here defy the usual gentrification curve entirely. In the low season, the average hotel price across the entire island is just $68 a night.
That is incredibly low.
Even in the high season, which runs right through the absolute peak of December to February, the average only bumps up to $109 a night.
Let's put those numbers in a regional context so they actually mean something. If you look at a heavily developed island like Koh Samui, the peak average right now is $132 a night.
Right.
And then there's Koh Phi, which looks like a steal on paper, averaging $66 a night.
Right.
But the guide points out a massive statistical illusion happening with Koh Phi.
Oh, the composition of that data is totally skewed.
Exactly. It makes Koh Mak's $109 average look incredibly impressive.
Because that Koh Phi average is heavily artificially dragged down by a massive inventory of cheap backpacker dormitories. You have literal warehouses of bunk beds.
Right. And if you want to replicate the Koh Mak experience on Koh Phi,
meaning a private, clean, beach-facing room where you aren't sleeping a few feet away from 12 strangers and a thumping bass line at 3 in the morning.
You are suddenly pushing $200 to $300 a night over there. Koh Mak gives you that serenity, locally owned, for an average of $109.
And it gets even more accessible on the lower end. Down on Ao Kao Beach, which is widely considered one of the most pristine beaches in the Gulf, you can still find budget bungalows starting around $27 to $35 a night in the low season.
That's amazing. And if you want to step up to a mid-tier resort with a pool, you are only looking at $80 to $120.
Which really begs the question, if the prices are this low and the global demand for untouched Thai islands is so astronomically high, how are they resisting the cash grab?
I mean, it sounds like a neighborhood HOA, right? But instead of aggressively policing the length of your front lawn, they're actively fending off multi-million-dollar international hotel conglomerates. How does a community of 400 families hold that line?
Well, that HOA analogy is actually spot on, but the stakes here are generational wealth. To understand how they resist, you have to understand the typical development cycle they are fighting against.
Okay, break that down for us.
Usually, a foreign conglomerate comes into an emerging destination and offers a local family an astronomical sum for their beachfront land.
Life-changing money.
Exactly. It's an amount of money they couldn't make in 10 lifetimes of running a small guest house. Most people sell.
Of course they do. Anyone would.
And once they do, the developers bulldoze the local bungalows, pour thousands of tons of concrete, and build a massive closed-loop resort.
Right.
From that moment on, all the profits from that new hotel, every cocktail sold, every room booked, leaves the local economy and gets wired to a corporate headquarters in London or New York or Hong Kong.
The local family has their one-time payout, but the community has permanently lost its sustainable economic engine.
Yeah, and Koh Mak somehow stopped that cycle.
By realizing that retaining the land is the only way to retain the power.
Precisely. By keeping the ownership local, the daily economic velocity stays local. They aren't relying on a one-time cash grab. They are preserving a continuous generational revenue stream.
That makes so much sense.
And because they hold the deeds, they hold the power to decide what gets built, what the noise ordinances are, and ultimately what kind of traveler they want to invite into their home.
It's just an incredible sociological experiment. But as we dig deeper into the guide's reality of traveling there in 2026, it becomes very clear that protecting this island doesn't just rely on community willpower.
No, they are heavily assisted by geography.
Right. Getting into this protected fortress requires running a bit of a logistical gauntlet. The baseline hotel costs look incredibly appealing, but the true financial and temporal picture for you involves some mandatory friction that you literally cannot avoid.
That friction is very real. And in 2026, it involves two specific evolving cost variables that you definitely have to factor in.
Let's hear them.
The first is a bureaucratic hurdle at the national level. The incoming government in Thailand has officially fast-tracked a 300 baht tourist entry fee.
So that's roughly, what, £7 or $8?
Exactly. And it is applied to all international arrivals flying into the country.
Now, obviously, an $8 fee isn't going to bankrupt anyone planning an international vacation, but the guide highlights a massive blind spot wrapped up in this new policy.
Oh, the insurance component.
Yeah. This state fee includes a 70 baht mandatory travel insurance component, and the trap here is purely psychological.
Because a tourist hears travel insurance included in my entry fee and immediately mentally checks that box, assuming they are fully covered.
Which is an incredibly dangerous assumption to make, particularly for remote island travel. This state-provided baseline insurance does not replace the need for comprehensive private travel insurance.
No, not at all. It is largely designed for basic in-country stabilization, not complex emergency medical evacuations, which, as we'll discuss later, is an absolute necessity for an island like Koh Mak.
So the trap isn't the cost, it's the false sense of security, and honestly the annoyance factor.
Right.
This fee doesn't conveniently show up on your Expedia or Kayak flight receipt.
Yeah.
Step off a 14-hour flight with your family, you're exhausted, you're queuing at the border, and suddenly you're hit with an unexpected localized charge before you've even seen a single palm tree.
It's definitely an expectation management issue. And while that fee affects everyone entering Thailand, the second logistical variable is highly localized just to the Koh Mak journey.
The ferry transport issues.
Yeah, the destabilization of ferry transport due to rising fuel costs in Trat province. Trat is the mainland province you have to navigate through to reach the island.
Let's actually walk through what this journey looks like for the listener, because this is not a hop on a direct flight to Phuket and take a 10-minute taxi to your resort situation.
Not even close. It's a multi-vehicle endurance test.
Right. The total travel time from Bangkok is estimated at 4 to 6 hours if everything aligns perfectly. First, you have to fly out of Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi Airport down to Trat Airport.
That's a 50-minute domestic hop running somewhere between 1,200 and 2,500 baht.
But you aren't at the water yet. From the Trat airstrip, you have to secure a minivan or a local songthae, which is like a shared truck, for a 30-minute overland transfer to the Lamangap Pier.
And that adds another 200 to 300 baht.
And then finally, you have to board a ferry for a 1 to 2 hour crossing over to Koh Mak, which costs between 350 and 450 baht.
And as you mentioned, the operators are really feeling the squeeze of marine diesel prices.
Right, which is leading to slight price bumps.
And far more concerningly, operators quietly canceling runs if the boat isn't full enough to justify the fuel burn.
So if you add up that segmented journey, you are looking at a total transit cost of 2,000 to 3,500 baht per person, purely to cross the distance from the capital to the island's shores.
I do want to note, for the dedicated backpackers listening, there is a more grueling budget route in the guide.
Oh, the bus?
Yeah, you can skip the flight and take an overnight bus from Bangkok's Eastern Bus Terminal all the way down the coast to Trat. It takes 8 to 10 hours of your life, but it drops that first leg cost down to a couple hundred baht.
It's a grind, certainly. But whether you take the flight or the overnight bus, the payoff for this multi-vehicle, exhausting 6-hour gauntlet is the sensory experience of the arrival itself.
The arrival sequence to Ban Ao Nid Pier sounds almost cinematic in its restraint.
It really does.
Yeah.
You approach from the north, across the Gulf, and the first thing you notice is what isn't there. There are no massive port cranes.
No high-rise concrete blocks shattering the natural tree line.
The boat docks, you step onto the wood, and there is no swarm of tuk-tuk touts screaming at you, fighting over your luggage, trying to drag you into their taxi.
It is just the sound of marine birds, the heavy smell of salt air, and a little wooden shack where you can sit down and eat a plate of fresh fish for 150 baht while you get your land legs back.
That stark, quiet arrival is crucial to understanding the underlying psychology of the island. That intense 6-hour journey acts as a natural, highly effective filter.
Oh, absolutely. If Koh Mak had allowed a developer to pave an airstrip right on the island, it would have been overrun in a single season. The charm would have evaporated instantly.
This is exactly what I was thinking while reviewing these logistics. I know we complain about the 300 baht fees and the minivan transfers, but is this complicated, exhausting gauntlet actually the island's greatest defense mechanism?
Undoubtedly.
Like, is the sheer lack of convenience a feature rather than a bug?
It's totally a feature. Friction is the ultimate deterrent for mass tourism. The journey inherently weeds out the crowds looking for a frictionless, brain-off weekend trip.
Right. If someone just wants to drink a fluorescent cocktail by a massive infinity pool and frankly doesn't care what country they are physically located in, they're not going to endure a flight, a sweaty minivan, and a bouncing ferry to get there.
They'll just go to a mega resort with an airport shuttle.
The friction of reaching Koh Mak inherently selects for intentional travelers.
Travelers who are willing to earn their isolation. But here is where it gets incredibly tricky. You can be the most intentional traveler in the world, you can survive the minivans and the ferries, but then you realize you might have timed this perfectly wrong.
Because of the weather? Yes. Because the entire region operates on a rogue weather system that can completely unravel your plans.
This is perhaps the most critical logistical nuance we can offer today, especially for travelers who are accustomed to visiting Thailand's Andaman coast, famous spots like Phuket, Krabi, or Koh Lanta.
Right.
The Gulf of Thailand, where Koh Mak sits, operates on an entirely opposite seasonal weather pattern.
Wait, opposite. So you could be looking at an Instagram feed of someone basking in the sun in Phuket, book a ticket to Koh Mak for the exact same week, and just walk into a wall of rain.
Precisely. They are governed by totally different monsoon trajectories. The dry, absolute peak season on Koh Mak runs from November through April.
Okay.
Within that window, December, January, and February are the golden months. The skies are aggressively blue, the sea is as flat as a mirror, but naturally this is also when those 78 scarce properties fill up completely.
And the economic algorithms push prices to their peak. The data shows February is the absolute apex. It is the single most expensive month to exist on the island.
Yeah, the average hotel jumps to $177 a night, which is a massive 160% increase from the low season average.
If you were looking for a sweet spot, March and April seem to be the strategic play.
Yeah.
You endure higher temperatures. I mean, it pushes 33 to 35 degrees Celsius, which is incredibly hot.
Extremely hot.
But the prices drop significantly before the weather turns.
But then we hit the period from May to October. The Gulf is hit by the southwest monsoon. The heaviest, most relentless rains fall in September and October.
And this leads to what the guide identifies as Trap 1, which is fundamentally a failure of modern travel technology.
The ferry schedule trap. This is fascinating because it highlights how algorithms can completely betray you.
Walk me through the mechanics of this trap, because it's a big one.
During the low season, two things happen simultaneously. First, the volume of tourists drops close to zero. Second, the weather becomes highly volatile and dangerous for small watercraft. In response, the ferry operators rationally reduce their schedules. They might drop from 4 crossings a day to just 1 single crossing per day.
Which makes sense from a fuel and safety perspective.
Yes, but imagine a modern traveler who relies entirely on digital booking platforms like Expedia or Booking.com. They are sitting in London or New York. They find a brilliantly cheap flight out of Trat Airport for a Monday morning, and they book a deeply discounted resort room on Koh Mak for that Sunday night.
To the algorithm and to the traveler, this looks like a perfectly seamless, economical itinerary.
It looks completely logical. You wake up on the island, take the morning boat, and catch your flight.
But the digital booking platform doesn't know, or simply isn't programmed to care, that the only ferry scheduled to leave Koh Mak on Sunday was canceled because a monsoon storm rolled in.
Exactly. Or that the Monday morning ferry doesn't depart the island until 2 hours after their mainland flight has already taken off.
Suddenly, the pristine tech itinerary shatters against physical reality.
Yeah.
The traveler is physically stranded on an island in the rain, they miss their international connection, and they're suddenly eating 2,000 to 5,000 baht in airline rebooking fees, plus the cost of an extra night's stay.
It's brutal. Booking a non-refundable room here in late September without cross-referencing the physical ferry schedule feels like buying front-row tickets to an outdoor music festival during a Category 3 hurricane.
Right. You might feel like a genius for getting an 80% discount on the seat, but there's a very high probability the band literally cannot get to the stage.
It's a brilliant analogy that exposes a real flaw in our reliance on centralized travel tech. These platforms are designed to abstract away the friction of geography in favor of frictionless transactions.
They sell you a bed, and they sell you a flight, but they completely strip away the local context required to connect those two purchases. They don't sell you the reality of the logistics.
So the defensive maneuver here is simple but mandatory. If you are traveling during the monsoon months, you must build in a mainland buffer night.
Yes. You never, ever schedule a ferry crossing and a flight connection on the exact same day when the weather is unpredictable. You cross the water a day early and sleep near the airport.
Exactly. It requires a return to analog travel planning.
Now, assuming you do book the right month and you successfully navigate the weather and the ferry schedule, the next massive mistake you can make involves the sheer physical layout of the island.
We are moving from meteorological traps to geographical ones.
Yes, this brings us to what the evaluation calls the beachside trap. To understand this, you have to understand how the island is zoned, and more importantly, how those zones are or aren't connected.
The island is essentially fractured into three distinct atmospheric zones. Let's start with Ao Kao. This is on the northwest coast.
Ao Kao is the gravitational center of Koh Mak. It's the stretch of sand you see in all the promotional photography. It has incredibly calm, shallow water, which makes it the premier choice for families and casual swimmers.
Because of this, it holds the highest concentration of restaurants and cafes. It also faces west, giving it a monopoly on the spectacular evening sunset views.
If you are a first-time visitor, Ao Kao is generally the safest baseline choice. Then you have Ao Suan, which sits on the western coast.
The topography here is more sheltered, the vibe is noticeably quieter, and this is where you'll find established properties like the Koh Mak resort.
And finally, there is Ao Pai down on the south coast. Getting here requires navigating a rough, unpaved dirt track. This zone is explicitly for travelers seeking total, unbothered isolation. You go there to disappear.
Which all sounds like a lovely variety of options, but here is the mechanism behind Trap 2. Koh Mak does not have a continuous coastal ring road.
Wait, really?
Yeah. If you look at an island like Koh Samui, there is a highway that just loops the entire perimeter. You can rent a scooter and endlessly circle the island looking for a place to eat. Koh Mak doesn't have that.
And that lack of infrastructure changes your entire relationship with the island. If you are looking at a digital map from thousands of miles away, Ao Suan and Ao Kao looks like they're right next to each other. It's a tiny island, right?
Right. But if you book your accommodation on Ao Suan, but you realize that all the specific seafood restaurants and cafes you want to visit are over on Ao Kao, you have a problem.
You can't just stroll down the beach.
No, you are facing a 15 to 20-minute, pitch black, incredibly sweaty bicycle or golf cart ride along unlit inland jungle tracks just to get your dinner.
Yeah.
And then you have to do it again to get home.
I have to stop and wrap my head around this. The island is only 16 square kilometers total.
Yeah.
It seems absolutely wild to me that you can be practically stranded on the wrong side of something so microscopically tiny just because you didn't zoom in far enough on Google Maps.
It seems counterintuitive until you are there, because the physical layout dictates the daily rhythm of your existence. The lack of a connecting ring road forces an extreme intentionality to your movements.
You can't just casually cruise the coastline on a whim.
Exactly. You are somewhat physically bound to the specific bay you initially chose. It makes the initial booking decision far more consequential than it would be almost anywhere else in the world. You're choosing a microhabitat, not just a hotel.
So the geography demands that you know what you want before you arrive. Let's look at the accommodation tiers across these bays and what it actually costs to inhabit these microhabitats, because there is a very specific economic structure here.
Let's do it.
For the backpackers, as we touched on earlier, the massive 20-bed dormitories simply do not exist by law. But that doesn't mean budget travel is dead.
In the high season, you can secure a basic standalone budget bungalow like the ones at Ao Pong Resort for somewhere between $900 and $1,200 baht. That's roughly $27 to $35 a night.
In the low season, those exact same bungalows drop to $600 to $800 baht.
Moving up to the mid-range tier, which is predominantly couples, the value proposition is arguably the strongest on the island. We mentioned the Koh Mak resort over on the quiet Ao Suan.
That runs $80 to $110 a night.
If you want to be in the main hub of Ao Kao, a place like Miramantra will cost you $100 to $130.
And if you are seeking that absolute isolation down the dirt track of Ao Pai, properties like Plug Blah run about 57 to 90 pounds. You are getting significant privacy and space for the price of a budget chain hotel in a western city.
For traveling families who need a bit more infrastructure, the evaluations highlight places like Koh Mak Coco Cap, which sits around $120 to $160.
And then we reach the top of the market. For luxury travelers, you are looking at the Koh Mak Green View, or the upper-tier pool villas on Ao Kao, which max out around $150 to $250 a night.
But there is a massive asterisk attached to that word, luxury.
It is a critical caveat. There is no true international five-star standard on this island.
No. If your definition of luxury is a St. Regis or a Four Seasons, meaning a staff of 5 waiting on your every whim, white glove service, marble foyers, and a concierge who can procure anything you desire at 2 in the morning, you will be deeply disappointed.
So what are you actually paying $250 a night for?
You are paying for a different definition of luxury. You are paying for absolute privacy, uncorrupted natural beauty, the sound of the ocean instead of a highway, and perhaps a private plunge pool.
You are paying for the absence of crowds. The luxury is the environment itself, not the human service layered on top of it.
Which is a beautiful reframe of value.
It really is. But regardless of whether you are paying $30 for a fan bungalow or $250 for a pool villa, once you settle into your chosen bay, the reality of sustaining your own biological needs day to day sets in.
Which brings us to the fascinating microeconomics of the island's food infrastructure and daily out-pocket survival costs. Because you can't just order Uber Eats.
No, the supply chains here are incredibly tight and hyper-localized. The food scene is heavily anchored in local seafood. What you are not finding are massive, sprawling night markets or endless strips of street food carts operating until dawn, like you would experience in Chiang Mai or Bangkok.
The scale simply doesn't support it.
I noticed the pricing data for food is incredibly reasonable, especially considering the captive audience of an island. At the local family-run restaurants, a whole, fresh-caught grilled fish is 200 to 350 baht.
A plate of pad thai is 80 to 120 baht. A bowl of tom yum soup is 150 to 200.
You can get a fresh coconut hacked open for you for 40 to 60 baht, and a cold Chang beer will run you 80 to 100.
To put that in a broader daily context, if 2 people sit down for a full multi-dish dinner at a local spot, the total bill will likely land between 600 and 900 baht. That is just $17 to $26 for 2 people to eat incredibly well.
However, the data strongly notes that if you choose to eat exclusively at your resort's in-house restaurant, you will be paying a 40 to 60% premium on those exact same dishes.
Now, my immediate instinct, and probably the instinct of a lot of travelers, when I see a resort charging 60% more for the exact same plate of pad thai, is to cry foul. It feels like a captive audience tourist trap.
But the economic breakdown actually defends this premium as a structural necessity rather than pure greed.
Yes, it is a fascinating lesson in physical supply chain economics. The slight premium on resort food isn't malicious price gouging. It's the literal physical cost of moving non-local mass across an ocean.
The small local spots down the beach are operating on micro-supply chains. They're serving whatever the local fishermen pulled out of the bay that morning, paired with herbs grown right behind the kitchen.
They have near zero freight costs.
Exactly. But the upscale resort is trying to offer a consistent international menu. They're trying to serve you imported Australian beef, specialized Western vegetables, or a specific bottle of French wine.
The logistical chain to bring a single hothouse tomato from a massive commercial farm in central Thailand onto a refrigerated truck, down the highway to Trat, onto a diesel ferry unloaded by hand at the pier and driven down a dirt track to a resort kitchen incurs a massive freight premium.
You are literally paying for the diesel required to move that tomato.
That makes absolute sense when you pull the curtain back. You see the same freight premium reflected in the local mini-marts too.
Yeah. A 1.5-liter bottle of drinking water is 15 to 20 baht. Instant noodles are 10 to 15. A bag of chips is 25 to 35. And local fruit is 30 to 60. You are paying for the boat ride for every single calorie.
And alongside these prices, there is a very strong, unspoken code of commercial etiquette on the island. It's a code of conduct rooted in survival.
Right. The community actively asks visitors to book their rooms directly through the hotel's website or email, rather than using massive online travel agencies like Agoda or Booking.com.
Because those platforms siphon off huge 15 to 20% commission cuts from these small family businesses.
They also ask you to rent your kayaks or bicycles locally rather than bringing them from the mainland. And critically, they beg you to be deeply conscious of your physical waste.
Because there is no magical garbage truck that takes it all away.
Exactly. The island has to physically manage all of its own rubbish. Every plastic water bottle, every snack wrapper you bring onto the island has to be dealt with on that small 16 square kilometer patch of earth. If you bring it, You own the consequence of it.
It requires a level of mindfulness that mass tourism usually allows us to completely ignore. So, taking all of this data, the accommodation tiers, the supply chain food costs, the transit fees, the evaluation calculates 4 highly specific daily budgets.
For the low or backpacker tier, you are looking at a total daily spend of $1,540 to $2,270 Bedley per day. That translates to roughly $44 to $65 US.
For the mid-range couple, you step up to $88 to $134 per person per day, which combined is $176 to $268.
For the high or luxury traveler, factoring in those pool villas and resort dining, it runs $195 to $320 per person per day.
And finally, they modeled a budget for digital nomads staying long-term. They estimate $900 to $1,300 monthly, with rent making up about $500 to $700 of that total if you secure a place during the low season.
I want to focus on that backpacker budget for a second. $44 to $65 a day. Because there are no cheap $10 dorm beds available by law, $44 acts as an unbreakable economic floor.
You simply cannot exist on this island for less than that.
And I have to challenge this. Are we just looking at the subtle gentrification of backpacking? Are they using economics to artificially sanitize the island, or is this simply a community deciding it actively doesn't want to deal with the fallout of the $10 a day party crowd?
It's an incredibly important distinction, and based on the sociological data, it is definitely the latter. It is a deliberate defensive boundary setting.
Oh, so.
Well, by legally refusing to build those 20-bed warehouses, they inherently filter out a very specific demographic. The traveler who is moving around Southeast Asia exclusively to drink cheap buckets of unregulated liquor and party until sunrise.
Because that specific traveler needs the $10 bed to subsidize the $30 bar tab.
Precisely. The island isn't trying to be exclusive to the ultra-rich. As we noted, $44 a day is still profoundly accessible for international travel, but that $44 floor requires a traveler who is seeking a quiet, nature-focused experience and who is willing to allocate their budget toward local businesses rather than a raucous, destructive social scene.
It is economic architecture designed to protect the peace.
And that deliberate economic architecture directly influences the entire culture of the island. By filtering out the chaos at the source, it results in a very specific and, frankly, very impressive safety profile.
The security environment on Koh Mak is virtually unparalleled in the region because they successfully banned the massive nightlife strips, because there are no buckets of rum being hawked on the sand by promoters, and because motorized water sports like jet skis are illegal. The baseline environment is inherently decelerated and calm.
The ban on jet skis is such a massive quality of life upgrade. If you know Southeast Asian travel, you know the jet ski scam is infamous.
Oh, it's the worst. You rent a machine for an hour, you return it in perfect condition, and suddenly the operator is pointing at a microscopic scratch on the hull, screaming that you caused it, and demanding hundreds of dollars while keeping your passport hostage.
Right. Koh Mak looked at that criminal ecosystem and solved it by just banning the machines outright.
It is the ultimate preventative measure. And this highly regulated, calm environment is particularly highlighted in the evaluations as being exceptionally safe for solo female travelers. There is no intense alcohol-fueled party pressure.
Furthermore, because the island is so small and the guest houses are locally run, the anonymity of mass tourism doesn't exist here.
The family hosting you usually knows your name within an hour of your arrival. You aren't just a room number. If you don't come back for dinner, someone notices. That intimate scale provides a profound psychological safety net.
Families also rave about the island because of its car-free status. Parents can actually relax. Kids can run around the tracks and the beaches without the constant, terrifying threat of high-speed scooter traffic or erratic taxis.
But, and this is a massive but, the evaluation issues a very stern, non-negotiable warning regarding medical emergencies. You might be safe from traffic, but you are not safe from biology.
This is the harsh trade-off of extreme isolation. There is a small health clinic on the island, but its capabilities are strictly limited. It is equipped for minor lacerations, mild food poisoning, and basic stabilization.
If you or your child experience a genuine acute medical emergency, cardiac arrest, severe trauma, appendicitis, you require an immediate medical evacuation.
Which means you are getting put on a speedboat or a ferry, racing back across the Gulf to the mainland, and then enduring a transport to a specialized hospital in Trat or Bangkok.
Which is exactly why that 70 baht government insurance fee we discussed at the airport is utterly insufficient. The evaluation explicitly states that anyone traveling to Koh Mak must carry comprehensive, private travel insurance that specifically covers emergency maritime evacuation.
Without it, a medical crisis could easily bankrupt you. They also highlight that nature is still nature. During the monsoon season, the seemingly placid south beaches can develop vicious rip currents. There are no lifeguards on duty. You have to respect the raw environment.
But when you do respect it and when the conditions align, the highlights of this island sound genuinely phenomenal.
The qualitative experiences reported are extraordinary.
The evaluation paints this incredibly vivid picture. Imagine waking up at 6 in the morning on Ao Kao. The water in the bay is perfectly glassy, almost mirror-like. You can take a kayak out and paddle silently through pristine ancient mangrove forests.
In the evening, you are eating fresh barracuda pulled from those exact same waters, grilled right on the beach.
And if you take a short boat ride over to the neighboring islets of Koh Kham or Koh Rayang, the snorkeling offers excellent 8 to 15 meter visibility over thriving reefs. It sounds like the paradise everyone is constantly chasing.
It does. But in the spirit of a brutally honest, unvarnished deep dive, we have to look at the other side of the ledger. The evaluation extensively details the honest disappointments. It is not a flawless utopia.
Right, let's talk about the friction.
Yeah.
The most common recurring complaint from visitors is food repetition.
Yeah.
We praised the microsupply chains earlier, but the reality of a 16 square kilometer island is that if you were there for more than 3 or 4 days, you're going to rapidly exhaust the culinary options.
You will end up eating at the exact same 3 local restaurants, ordering the exact same dishes because that is simply all there is.
Which is the unavoidable trade-off for fighting off commercial development. If you ban international chains and mega resorts, you don't get 50 different global cuisine options. You get what the island can produce.
But the far more significant systemic reality check the evaluation provides is aimed directly at that low-carbon eco-label the island so proudly wears.
Yes, the prestigious Green Destination certification. This was the most jarring revelation in the entire document for me. The evaluation points out that while the community genuinely puts in the effort, they run marine conservation programs, they aggressively mandate local ownership, they manage their trash.
Labeling the island low-carbon is highly aspirational, bordering on deceptive.
Because the reality is the entire island still runs on massive industrial diesel generators, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
This highlights a crucial, often ignored point about the profound friction between eco-marketing and brutal infrastructure reality. Generating reliable electricity on a remote, disconnected island is an incredibly difficult engineering challenge.
Yes, some of the more progressive resorts are beginning to install solar panel arrays, but the foundational power grid relies entirely on burning fossil fuels shipped across the ocean.
The global travel industry loves to hand out these shiny green certifications because they sell well to Western tourists, but travelers deserve to understand the mechanical truth operating behind the curtain.
Exactly. Slapping a prestigious low-carbon label on an island that is literally kept alive by the constant hum of diesel generators feels a bit like ordering a Diet Coke to offset a massive 2,000-calorie double cheeseburger.
Right. You are making an effort, sure, but let's be honest about the total caloric intake here.
It makes me wonder, is the travel industry simply too quick to hand out these eco-medals to places that aren't actually sustainable but are just, undeveloped?
It is a very common trap in the sustainability discourse. We frequently conflate a lack of concrete with sustainable infrastructure. Because Koh Mak doesn't have high-rises, it looks green. And Koh Mak is protecting its local environment fiercely, which is highly laudable.
But achieving true, verifiable carbon neutrality requires massive, centralized technological investment, advanced battery grids, wind turbines, underwater cables that a community of 400 families simply cannot afford to finance on their own. It is a transition in progress, not a finished utopian state.
Well, if the reality of repetitive food menus, the absolute lack of 5-star international luxury, or the distant, constant thumb of a diesel generator are deal breakers for your vacation, the evaluation generously offers 2 highly specific geographic alternatives to Koh Mak that solve different problems.
If you need a bit more scale and infrastructure, the first alternative is Koh Kood. This is Koh Mak's immediate neighbor, sitting about 30 kilometers away across the water.
Koh Kood is a significantly larger landmass, roughly 105 square kilometers. The data says it is noticeably more developed. It has a much wider culinary variety, arguably better and larger beaches, but as a direct result, it is slightly more crowded.
because of the wider range of options. Prices there span a massive spectrum, from $40 a night for a basic room all the way up to $300 a night for high-end luxury.
The second alternative caters to a totally different logistical need, and that's Koh Lanta, located over on the Andaman side of Thailand.
This is crucial because it means it operates on the completely opposite weather pattern, avoiding the Gulf monsoons. Koh Lanta is highly developed for connectivity, making it incredibly friendly to digital nomads.
It features massive, long stretches of beach, world-class diving access, and a price range of $25 to $200 a night.
So if you need reliable internet or a vast array of restaurants, you pivot to Koh Kud or Koh Lanta. But let's bring our focus back to Koh Mak for the grand finale.
The evaluation synthesizes all of this data, the costs, the friction, the weather, the eco-reality, into a final value proposition. They break down whether this island is actually worth the effort for 5 specific archetypes of travelers. Let's explore who actually belongs on this island.
Let's do it. For the backpacker's archetype, the final assessment is that it is worth it, but with very strict conditions.
The primary condition being self-awareness. You have to genuinely want quiet. If you are going there looking for the legendary Thai party scene, you will be bored out of your mind and trying to leave by day 2. You are paying a premium for silence.
For the mid-range couple archetype, the assessment is a resounding, unqualified yes.
The evaluators call this the clearest yes on the board. When you look at spending $176 to $268 a day combined, the sheer value of the privacy, the beachfront access, and the tranquility you receive compared to what that same money buys you on a hyper-developed island like Koh Samui is just exceptional.
It is the perfect demographic fit.
For the family archetype, it is worth it, again with critical conditions. You need to strategically book a property with a pool on the calm waters of Ao Kao to keep kids entertained. You must bring absolutely all your own specialist gear, baby formulas, specific medicines, because you cannot buy them there, and you absolutely must purchase evacuation insurance.
For the luxury archetype, it is a cautious yes, heavily dependent on expectation management. You have to understand that you are paying top dollar for environmental exclusivity, for raw natural beauty, and for the right to be left alone.
Yeah.
You are not paying for an international 5-star standard of obsequious service.
And finally, the digital nomad archetype. The assessment says it is worth it, but the condition attached to this recommendation is absolutely fascinating. They suggest it only as a strict digital detox.
The infrastructure data shows that while the internet is serviceable for sending basic emails, it completely falls apart for sustained, high-bandwidth remote work or video calls.
If you actually need to hit deadlines, the evaluation flatly suggests you go to the neighboring, more developed Koh Chang instead.
For the digital nomad, this recommendation sounds less like travel advice and more like a psychological intervention. If you are going to Koh Mak to stare at your laptop screen all day, you are missing the entire philosophical point of the island.
It is an intervention. The island's infrastructure is actively demanding that you unplug. It is a forced geographic return to analog travel.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, if we pull back from the logistics and the ferry schedules and look at what Koh Mak represents for the overarching future of global travel, it all comes back to our main thesis.
Koh Mak's greatest asset, its most powerful economic and cultural weapon, is simply its ability to say no.
By aggressively refusing to build an airport, by legally banishing the jet skis, and by systematically blocking foreign developers from buying up the coastline, this small community of 400 families has successfully preserved something that is practically extinct in modern Southeast Asia.
An authentic, quiet, locally sustained ecosystem.
They stop the Petri dish from being consumed by the bacteria of mass tourism. It's an incredible victory. But reading through this data leaves me with one lingering, slightly terrifying thought that wasn't directly answered in the evaluation.
What's that?
As Koh Mak gains more and more mainstream media attention, like that massive 2025 BBC feature broadcasting its perfection to the world, the property values on those 16 square kilometers are going to inevitably, mathematically skyrocket.
And that impending surge in capital is the ultimate existential test of their community firewall.
Right. Because holding the line is relatively easy when the offers are small. But how long can local generational families realistically resist the temptation of massive multinational foreign buyouts?
When an international conglomerate finally offers a local family true, multi-generational, life-changing wealth just for their small plot of sand, can a community truly maintain its consensus just to protect a quiet beach?
It is the defining question, not just for Koh Mak, but for the entire future of global ecotourism. Can local culture survive global capital?
We will have to wait and see if the firewall holds.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the reality of Koh Mak. That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.